So now we'll move to the second session of the masterclass with Rono Jacob, Director of Product Management at Dhruva. So he brings in 17 plus years of experience. He is experienced in building a SaaS and on-premise solution around storage and configuration automation for enterprises. Previously, he has worked with BMC Software as a senior product manager, and currently he is handling the product ownership of Cloud Ranger, a SaaS-based platform for data protection and disaster recovery of AWS cloud environments. So here now I would like to hand over the session to Rono Jacob sir. And today he'll be speaking on the topic, shifting focus from design and execution to vision and strategy. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Priyanka, and great presentation, Praveen. Always good to hear about the digital transformation. So over to the second session of this masterclass. Today we'll be talking about how do you shift focus from design and execution to strategy and vision. Over the course of this presentation, I hope to start with some of the basic things and then talk you through how you could take that transition or how you could step up through the journey. So before we start, I just want to put a question to the audience here today. How do you connect? Do you actually connect with the features that you are developing today? Do you connect with the strategic outcomes that are there with it? Are you able to see the bigger picture or the strategic outcomes with the features that you're developing today? It's something for you to go back and think through. Is that something that you connect with? If you're out there nodding your head and saying, no, this is not something I truly understand today, what my company's outcomes are and how these are helping, then you don't need to feel left out, because numerous surveys today shows that a lot of product managers today are in the same boat, where a key challenge is understanding, what are we building and how does it help the bigger picture to work with. The good news is, hopefully through this presentation, I'll be able to walk you through some of those steps that can help you understand the vision and strategy that you should be looking at and how you could take the steps to build that direction. So very quickly, since we're talking about vision and strategy, I just want to start with, what is a vision? What is a vision? So vision, it describes what a company is going to do and what it wants to be. A vision could be at a company level. If you have a product portfolio, a vision could essentially also be a product vision that you have. A vision is a long-term view. It's an aspirational view. It kind of sets out saying, this is what we really want to be. It's a statement that you're making out there and saying, this is where, how we think as a company to go with. An example of that is Netflix. Netflix vision is becoming the best global entertainment distribution service. That's a vision that they have put out, saying this is what we want to do. On the other hand, strategy, it describes the steps which help the company achieve its vision. In other words, it's a high-level plan that tells you, how do you actually look at a vision, whether it's your company vision, whether it's your product vision, how are you actually going to achieve that? A strategic document or a strategy document typically would comprise of goals, initiatives, and then you would have a roadmap as a part of it. It would also have your vision. And it's that high-level plan that crystallizes and tells you, to meet this particular vision, we're going to have so-and-so initiatives. Against each of these initiatives, you're going to have some goals against it, or you could have goals and initiatives that run in parallel. And then you have a list of roadmap items that, the directional big items that you're thinking of how you want to rally around it. Now that we've looked at vision and strategy, the obvious question is, do we really need a vision and strategy? After all, as product managers, we are building stuff. We understand what the customer wants. We are doing the interviews. If you're working in a mature product, you have this huge backlog of items that need to be done. So do we really need a vision and a strategy? Well, one of the reasons, or the key areas when you look from a vision and strategy perspective is, why do we really need it? A vision and a strategy is so relevant because a vision and a strategy helps you align to the outcomes that you're looking at. So when you start to work on things, when you're starting to build something out, and you want to understand where is the bigger picture, where is it heading out, if you have it laid out in a format which says, this is the vision, this is the strategy, these are the goals, these are the initiatives, it gives you a very, very clear picture on what you're building against what initiative you want to associate with. And therefore, you can come together to understand, okay, this is the overall outcome that will happen with what I'm doing. The second part of it is communicating with stakeholders, communicating with a wider audience within your organization. Now, remember, as product managers, we would be working on a lot of features, we would be talking to a lot of discussions, and a lot of the information that we have with us is sometimes tribal knowledge. The way we see things is not how the entire audience in a company would look at it. And for that matter, even sometimes when we talk to our customers and we're talking to them the direction, they may not see it. But as we take this vision and strategy and you present it to the customer, or when you present it to the internal teams, it starts to bring that communication. They say, okay, now I can understand, this is the strategy, this is why you're building it, this is how this is the steps that we're taking towards it. The last and the more important one for us from a day-to-day operation perspective is with prioritization and resource allocation. So when you have a strategy out there and when you're looking to do a lot of things on your plate as a product manager, I'm sure many of you would always be in a position where you say, there's so many things we could do. Why don't we do this feature? Why don't we do this particular area? Why we shouldn't be going to this particular line? Look at what competition is doing. Look at what this person is doing. And you have a lot of ideas that come on your plate. But what the vision and strategy helps you do is it helps you have that clear oversight or that guideline, which helps you understand, okay, with this vision, with this strategy, it's important for me to now start to prioritize things, to allocate the best amount of my resources or my investments in this direction so that the overall strategy plays out and therefore it gets me closer to the vision. So that's why, when you look at it from a vision and strategy perspective, it's important for an organization or as a product team or a product to have a vision and a strategy to work with. Now, when we talk about a vision and a strategy, we also, as product managers, start to ask ourselves, okay, strategy is important. We need to be having a strategy, but I really want to be a strategic product manager. And what I want to know at this point of time really is, from building a product to launching a product to its marketing part of it, what constitutes a strategy? What should I be thinking more from a strategic perspective? Early on in my career, when I started out as a product manager, I came from an engineering background. I was a developer, and then I shifted to product management. And when I made that shift, I was very early in the game, and I really did not understand the entire facets of what product management was. And at the same time, I also did not understand what it took to actually build a product and market it out. So when I looked at it in that sense, the pragmatic marketing framework, which is available out there, and if something you haven't seen, was an eye-opener to me to help me understand, as a product manager, as when you're looking to build your products, what does it involve? The pragmatic marketing framework talks about what it takes to build and market products, and it puts around all these activities or areas that you need to be looking at when it comes to building and marketing products. Now, if you look at this image out here in front of you, what this framework talks about is, on the left-hand side, you have the strategy. On the right-hand side, you have execution. And it lists out all the items from left to right from a strategic and execution perspective. The top part talks about what you need to be looking at from a market perspective, and the bottom part talks about what you need to be doing from a product perspective. So once you start to look at all of these pictures, you start to understand, or you start to see things in a very different way. And when you're starting to look at things from a design and execution perspective, the next question that comes up, say, what does it take to be strategic? What else should I be looking at? And you start to see, there's so many elements that it takes to building and marketing a product. Now, all of these functions you probably may not be involved in, but at the same time, as a product manager, you may touch some of these items depending upon what stage or what responsibilities you hold in your organization. These responsibilities are broadly broken up between product managers and product marketing, or the marketing organization that you see. But it's important as a product manager, when you start to think of it from a strategic perspective, that you start to understand all these pillars. For this session, what we'll do is we'll pick on one of these, and then we'll go a little deeper into it. Market problems, I'm going to take this into a little bigger concept around problems. how should you be looking at problems, and how do you want to look at it in a wider perspective? So problem identification and definition. We all write requirements out there. We all build the product. The genesis of our product is to actually solve a particular need for a customer. And when we look at it from that perspective, what we usually do is, we have statements, or there's a backlog that we work against. We get ideas. We have people, all sorts of people, telling us what we should be doing in the product. Most of the time, what we get coming to us are solutions. You need to be adding this, or I need this particular option in the product, or I need you to be building this particular integration. And often what happens in this scenario is we are caught within symptoms, but not actually to the actual problem. Now, as a step to that, what we do is we end up conducting interviews, we do data analysis, and then we arrive at what the real problem is. So I wanted to put this perspective to you. As you start to look at the problem identification and definition, it's important that as you look at it from your day-to-day operational part of it, where you're caught heavily into a lot of tasks that you're doing as a product manager, it's important to set out time in your calendar, in your time, where you structure the way you go about identifying a problem. And that part means you're doing interviews in a more structured manner. Interviews, customer interviews, there's the concept of a customer interview. I would like to call it as who are you building it from? Who is the user? Who's the person that you're catering to? And this could mean that you end up talking to a wide variety of people. You could be talking to existing customers. You could be talking to prospects. You could be calling somebody, internally who's front facing to a customer to understand what that problem is. And I would say go deeper till you understand, what the real problem is out there. That's the first step. So to help you identify the problem. Now that you understand the problem, the second part involved into it is really in the definition of the problem. Now these are two different items. Identifying a problem and defining the problem are very different things. Once you know, okay, this is what the pain is, the definition of the problem that you want to solve for, it can take multiple shapes. You can go from a narrow perspective, you can actually make it a broader perspective. And this is where your vision and strategy comes very, very tightly aligned to it. So as you understand the problem and you start to do your research around it, having a tighter look at your vision and strategy, aligning to it, helps you frame the right set of the definition of the problem that you want to solve for. The third part, obviously, is with these two in place, you now want to look at it from a prioritization and an opportunity perspective. Why solve this problem? How critical this problem it is to solve? And broadly, from a business perspective, what you should be considering when you're looking to tackle a problem is, what does it do for my product? Is it going to build differentiation? Will I be able to monetize this capability? Or from my existing customer perspective, is this going to give me a loyalty and a growth kind of a strategy out there? What is this problem really going to solve? Now, as you start to make this as a practice to do identification, definition, and then categorize it in your priority and opportunity perspective, what you start to see in this course is you're slowly moving away from a tactical way of looking at a problem to looking at it in a much bigger perspective. But to give you a very specific example to it, around 5-6 years ago at Dhruva Software, as Priyanka mentioned, we are in the business of data protection. In very simple terms, to put it out there, if you are an organization that you work in, the organization that you work in, you as end users in your organization could be using your laptops or your desktops or any of your applications out there. Now, the laptop sitting out there, you could be holding a lot of critical information, you could be working on projects, and you could have information out there. And therefore, the data needs to be backed up in the rare event that your laptop crashes, or in the more recent cybersecurity scenarios, if there is a ransomware attack and your entire laptop, so your entire network is compromised, you could be losing a lot of data. So 5-6 years ago, we had a flagship product that focused around protecting these laptops and desktops. And what we ended up seeing was, with the advent of SaaS starting to pick up, we started to see a lot of companies come forward and say, Office 365, for those who are familiar with Office 365 or G Suite, if you're using one of those, we started to see this trend where customers came back and said, look, I have Office 365, OneDrive is available for free, and we're just going to ask my users to dump their data out there and then be done with it, so I don't really need a backup solution. Now, this presented a problem to us because our sales would come back and tell us, look, we have this situation on the ground where, some of the customers are coming in and saying, they don't need a backup solution. Now, it's important to understand that the way we offer our solution to a customer versus the way a customer thinks of it, that's where you start to understand how important it is to identify the opportunity. To a customer, your solution which you're presenting at this point of time, maybe, I have an alternative. The alternative might not be exactly a backup solution, but it's a good enough solution. It meets my need. In our case, we started to hear that come up in a lot of opportunities. So we spent time looking at it. We did the obvious things that you do. You started to explain backup and putting data in Drive, the pros and cons, started to message it out. But when you start to do all of this, you win some, you lose some, and you start to see this problem out there. So what we did from that perspective was we sat down with the customer, and we started going through this discovery phase with the customer to pin down the problem. And we started to see that as the customer started to adopt Office 365, they was now starting to create a new set of corporate information that they were parking in Office 365. Their mailboxes, their OneDrive, and none of this data was sitting anywhere in the on-premise world. They didn't have it stored anywhere. And they were all under the assumption that Office 365 always implicitly had backups, so there was nothing to worry about it. To us, what that meant was when we looked at the problem, we started to peel it out and said, okay, so the real problem is not that the customer doesn't, want a solution to safeguard his enterprise data, but the real problem here is the customer is confusing the fact that, that he has two different sources and one circumvents another. We then spend time understanding, how should we look at this problem? How should we frame it out? And we started digging deeper into Office 365. And that's where the definition started to fold for us, going from a narrow view to a broader view. We ended up realizing that from an organization perspective, first, Office 365 data was very critical to them. Two, they existed a new market that was emerging with new workloads that were forming out there, where a customer wanted that data also to be safeguarded. And it aligned with our overall vision, which said we wanted to be protecting all enterprise data out there. So we took that as a problem. We defined the problem saying we now need to solve for Office 365 backup. And that led us to build out a problem, led us to build out a solution around it. And we took a broader strategy. And why I'm giving you this example is, every once in a while, when you sit down to solve these problems with your customers and you do these interviews, it's so important to the way you structure your interview. It's so important to ask the customer to give you his scenarios, and rather than you lead with those questions. So having that habit of writing open-ended questions that you can ask your customer to get a feel of his environment, what are his challenges, is very important to actually identify and define the problem. The problem presents the opportunity. The problem helps you think in a broader perspective, say, is there a new market that we can go and tap into? Will the customer pay money if we offer a new solution? What does it do to our overall vision? What does it do to our overall strategy? So that's how you should be looking at when you look at the problem definition and perspective to solve it. Now, we talked about the vision, we talked about strategy, we talked about the frameworks, and I want to leave you today with some recommendations on how can you start to shift from design and execution, if that's what you're doing predominantly, and to start to think about vision and strategy and have a strategic view. How do you start to do that? The first thing you should be doing, really looking to do, is being aligned to outcomes. Now, if you don't understand what your company's mission and strategy is, I would say that's step one. Sit down with your leadership team, or if there's some document around there, understand what is the company's vision and strategy. Next, look at your product strategy. If you're a part of your leadership team, well and good. If you're not there with your leadership team and this is something that you never paid attention to, seek out and ask, what is our product strategy? What is it that we are doing, and what are our goals and initiatives that we need to work against? If there is none that exists today, you're probably in a company that is still molding up, and you have the task to do it. I would encourage you to start to put together a draft document of the goals and initiatives to do it. This structure helps you to understand whatever you're building on, what are the outcomes that you would seek to achieve with it. And that's a very important step that you need to take. The second is discovery and stakeholder interactions. Now, if you're working in an area where you don't know what your market is, I would tell you that's the second thing that you should go and look at. Focus on your market, understand what your market is. A question that I hear from folks coming in and saying is, well, we have no market, we're building something net new, there is actually no market. I would tell you the answer to that is no. It's not that there is no market. It's just that probably from a definition perspective, maybe from an analyst report perspective, there isn't a dedicated market that you're working in, but you're probably a part of a broader market out there. And it's often important to understand in that broader market, where does your product sit? What is your TAM? What is your total addressable market? What is your total addressable market that you're working into? So that's the second thing that you should be looking at. The third area is competitive landscape. Again, a misnomer that many of us have is, look, there is no competition. You know, we often associate competition saying direct competitors. The reality of the fact is, from a customer's perspective, if you are solving a problem for a customer, the customer has today an alternative. After all, he has a problem, he wants it solved, so he's either using some alternative to solve it. That solution could be an homegrown solution. That solution could be using a good enough product to meet what his current use cases. And it's important for you to understand this part of it. You know, where's your competition? What are your competition doing? And where is your strength to go and do it? We talked about interviews. Again, I would repeat this: spend enough time in a month blocking your calendars out. Practice a methodical way of taking interviews. Going into interviews and asking a yes or no question really doesn't give you much. And if you're building a feature, you're going into the customer and saying, look, we're going to model it in this workflow, would it work for you? And the customer say yes. And they say, I'm going to be building this feature and it's going to be solving this. Would you be interested in it? And he says yes. Are very, very different questions from telling the customer, look, we're building this capability. We're going to be offering it at a higher premium. Is that something that you would look at? As an example, and that would tell you really, how much does the customer value your feature? Is it something that the customer puts a premium on it, or does he kindly see it in a different way? You also have to step into understanding open-ended questions. This comes with practice. So I would encourage you, before you do this, is whenever you go for interviews, set up the way of writing open-ended questions. It is very hard to do it at the initial time, so that you allow the customer to give you his environment, his perspective, and without you leading him to conclusions too quickly. The last part of it, when you look at the discovery and stakeholder interactions, is talk to your cross-functional teams. Now, if you're caught in this vacuum where you believe customers versus the engineering and product teams, especially if you're on the technical side of product management, is all you need to be doing, I would encourage you strongly to go and talk to your support teams. They hear the customers, they are the ones bearing the brunt often of an angry customer. And when it gets escalated, you might be invited to be a part of the call. But talk to them, and they have the real pulse on the ground. The second group you might even be interested to talk to is your marketing team. Go to your marketing team and ask them, hey, I'm really curious to know what campaigns we run for our products. What are the campaigns that are there? What is our lead generation? Can you give me insights around this? What is our our SQLs, our MQLs that we look at? What is the ratio that happens? And this starts to broaden your scope to understand, from building something that you're building from a technical perspective to a feature, how is it actually all adding up? How are you selling this feature? How does it become available to customers? How are you putting it out there? The third one is solutions options that you're looking to build. Again, we talked about the pragmatic marketing framework, and I hope some of you who haven't seen it would actually go back and look at it. And this is something that very early in my career, I made this often mistake, because I came from an engineering background. And for me, it meant a solution to a problem is to build a feature. And I would always approach it in that way. I would encourage you to look at it from a more holistic approach, from looking at building features to asking yourselves, is there a partnership that we could solve for? Is there an OEM way to do it? Is this simply as good as just building an integration? Is this a pricing area that we need to tackle? Why are we losing opportunities? Is it a pricing conversation? Is it a discounting conversation? Do I really need to be adjusting my licensing? Where does it need to go to solve a particular problem? When it comes to delivering features, again, something that I would leave you with is, again, if you're on the technical side of it and you write the requirements, you work with a UX counterpart, you build the mockups, you're done, work with engineering, you go through the scrums, you release it, and then you put your hands up. Here's again something that I would encourage you to think at. When you look at your features, ask yourself, how is a user going to consume it? If you have a sales team, if your product is complex, ask yourself, the people who are going in front of the customer, how are they going to explain your product? How are they going to present this product to the customer? How are they going to explain these features? Do you have a best practices guide? Do you have a recommendation on how they should do it? Remember, when you go to a showroom today to buy something, the salesman out there who tells you how to buy your product is the one who is the same way, who's championing how your product or your features grow. So it's important for you to have this holistic view as you start to build out features. And as product managers, you plugging yourself into all of these facets to understand it will help you move around from, taking a tactical approach to seeing things more from a vision and a strategic perspective. The last part is, if you have time on your bandwidth, I'm sure as product managers, your days are always packed with a lot of things. But if you are, you have bandwidth on your time and you have a team that would work, willing to work with you, you have your counterparts, I would encourage you to a monthly practice of presenting mini business plans. Wherever you think there is a feature or a capability that you're presenting and you think there's a bigger opportunity that could come out, develop the habit of presenting mini business plans. It will help you see things in a much, much broader perspective, and it will slowly groom you up to look at things more from a vision and a strategic perspective. So to recap, we talked about the need for vision and strategy. We talked about what are the frameworks that are involved to building and marketing activities. We looked at how to identify and define problems, and then we looked at the steps that you could take today to be a strategic product leader. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I do see there's a question out there. Yes, Yasha, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, hi Ronak. Thank you so much. I think it was a very insightful presentation. When you said building mini business plans, could you please tell us a specific structure to follow while building a business plan? Like how should it be, and how do you come up with a business plan, and how do you structure it and present it? Yeah.
Sure. So when that's, by the way, a good question. So if you're looking at it from that perspective to say, build a mini business plan, what I would encourage you to do is to look, there are enough frameworks available on the net, but in a broad way to put it out there is start with the market. What is the potential opportunity out there? And, you're looking at a market. If you don't know the market, let's say you're solving a particular problem, you've arrived at the conclusion that this problem could be solved in a bigger way. And now you take the first step. The first step really is to say, okay, this problem tackles what initiative, what is the bigger picture out there? The business plan helps you identify, is there a market, by the way, out there? Your market could be your hypothesis of what that market is. Maybe it's into the data protection space, or maybe it's into a customer interaction space. And it's your understanding of that market out there. The next question you want to do with that is to say, okay, with this market, what is the TAM? What could we achieve if we go after this market with this capability? And then you're trying to show an evolution of how this product would evolve with it. So you're going into step 2 to say there is a TAM. I project this market is at 5 billion. It's growing at 10%, 20%. We could get 2%. This is your hypothesis. You could put some research around it. That's step 2. The second step 2. Step 3 is, looking at it and saying, who solves for this problem today? Is there competition out there? Now, again, we talked about competition. So competition could be something, because if you're going into a new market, you could look at it and say, is there other competitors out there? What are they solving for? How are they solving for it? You outline that. Step 4 is really saying, what would you do to differentiate in that space? You're now taking it into a bigger perspective, and you're saying, there are people doing it. There's enough market. Why should we build this product? What is our edge? What is our differentiation? As you start to talk a little bit about, what is your high level view of your differentiation or your hypothesis? You could back it up the following slides with a little more color to it, which says, by doing this, we expect to grow the market. By this month, we expect to enter this market, help align with this vision, this strategy, and take us this way. So you start to play out the bigger components, and then you start to lead down to the lines of saying what we should eventually build. So that's one way to look at building it. Like I said, there are enough frameworks out there and examples on the net that could help you. Yasha, I hope that kind of answered your question.
Yeah, that really helped. And is there any specific structure or template that you would suggest, for people just trying to move into the strategic product roles? Like, I'm more focused on design and execution part, and probably if I could take some small step to build a simple business plan and present it, like any simple framework or something or references which you could share, that would help.
Sure. So you could look at, you could look at starting with simple things like, I don't know what tool you use in your organization from a prioritization perspective, but if you're
Jira.
Jira, and what do you use from a product management perspective? Is it still Jira, or do you use any other tools out there?
Jira only. Yeah, completely Jira. For managing the backlog and initiatives, it's all Jira. Yeah.
Okay, Jira has a tool called on the roadmap side of it. That's one way to look at it. But very specifically to your business case part of it, probably I could share with you some offline templates that you could look at, which just show you the case examples of how to build it, how to build out a template to work with.
Okay. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir, and I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah. So extension to the previous question and the details you mentioned about the market research, and we need to see the competitors, how they're moving into the market and all the stuff, right? So see, so my question is, even most of these seminars or webinars, people used to say that we need to see the market research and what competitor is doing, etc., etc. So here, see, I'm working from an payment domain company, and see, we have a lot of info security policies where even we don't know most of the information of the products also. So if I want to excuse me, if I want to know how the competitor, the same type of products we are doing the payment processing, so the amount of difficulty I'm facing in digging the details in our company with a lot of security policies. So how do we compare these kind of situations to the market, in the market, the competitors product, like how they are doing and what are the, what kind of APIs they're doing, or what's the next business steps, roadmap for next 2 years, what they're doing. So what kind of ways we find out in this kind of difficult situations to figure out that okay, this is how the competitor is looking into it, so we can do a different kind of thing from our end. So how do we figure out this kind of areas?
Very good question, Shastri. The classic product manager's dilemma. I want to know what my counterpart is doing in another company, so that I'm not caught off guard, or my boss comes down and says, look, this company has done something like this, we are completely caught off guard. Now, obviously, every company will safeguard their strategy. Every company will never disclose the big things they're working on. That's their advantage. That's the USP. And while you may want to look at it in that direction and say, where is that company going? What is that company doing at that part of it? My experience or my recommendation to you would be, it's usually a futile exercise to try and do it, because when you start to take that, you start to take at times what it can do is it can backfire to you, because sometimes it may not align with your vision and strategy, and while you don't see the bigger vision and strategy that they are working to, you starting to do something completely orthogonal or just copying them may not be in your best interest. They obviously would be playing to their advantage. That said, there are two ways in which you could work with this. The first is actually to look at the analyst reports. I don't know if you have interactions with analysts like Gartner and others. So that's a top-down way to go with it. If you work in an industry where there is a magic quadrant published or there are reviews published around it, that's one way to go and look at it. The second way to really go and look at it is to hold a session with the analyst and then say, we are going down this path of it. What is the general industry guidance? What are we seeing as big trends out there? What is the guidance to work with? How do we tackle that? So that's another way to take with it. And the third, obviously, is to go into these forums, talk to counterparts, talk to people out there, and get it. But if you're going down the path strictly to say, tell me what my competition is doing so that I can do it, I would say that's really not essentially the right way to do it. What you want to do more is from a competitive perspective, understanding who is competition, what is their edge today, and what are they strong at, and less of where are they heading. Where they're heading is something that they would change, and you may or may not see about it. Shastri, I don't know if that kind of gives you a glimpse into your question.